You all for attending the tenant education course, which is hosted by Wellspring Family Services and will be co-facilitated by myself, Billy Hancock, and Sarah Kinney. A little bit of an introduction about who I am. I've been working at Wellspring Family Services now. This May will be 12 years. I started out as a case manager, AKA housing stability specialist. I did that for 9 years, working in all the different programs. And the past 2.5 to almost 3 years now, I've been the housing locator. So my job right now is working primarily with landlords to establish working partnerships with them to help us house families so that we can work toward eliminating homelessness in the community. And with that, I'll let Sarah introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Sarah Kinney. I work at Wellspring with Billy, and Billy's been doing this presentation for longer than I have, but we've been working on it together now for the past few months and excited to bring it to you.
All right.
So our objectives for today, we're going to learn the 3 keys to finding and maintaining permanent housing. So we're going to talk about how to prepare a strong housing application, how to find a rental property that fits your needs, and how to be a successful tenant. And we'll also get into what to do if your housing stability is at risk. So we'll talk about what are your rights as a tenant, how to connect with resources if you're behind on rent, and job search tips. And then we'll have a space for questions at the end. Feel free to unmute yourself at the end and ask questions, or you can drop your questions into the chat, whatever you prefer. All right, and Billy is going to tell us about the first key.
Okay. We put that key up there, and every time I see that, I always think about the first time I did this training, because I had someone attend the training and was very upset when we were done because I didn't have a key for an apartment when they left, because it was called at that time the keys to permanent housing. So I had a person actually show up, they were from a different country, English as a second language, and they really expected me to give them a key when we were done. So we decided to change it to the tenant education course, and because we don't have a key and we don't have actual housing. But what we do offer today in this training is the ideas and suggestions and recommendations on how to find housing and how to stabilize housing, how to be a good tenant. And we're going to cover all of those things throughout this training.
All right.
Okay. The first key, you want to be the best applicant you can be. So how to prepare for your housing search. So it's important, like anything, you need to plan. It's important to prepare for your housing search. And what we got here are some things that may assist you in doing that. Starting with number 1, understanding the barriers that may disqualify you from housing and find solutions to those barriers. For example, repairing poor credit, making payment plans on debts you may have incurred as a former tenancy, resolving charges on your criminal history and background, because those are things that your potential landlord will be screening for. Also, we recommend that you do prepare to take time off from work, school, or what have you to do your housing search. It's a job. Like I said, it's my job, so I know it's a job. So you want to prepare for it. No, most apartments right now, they're doing virtual tours, so you really can't go on the properties. But if you have the technical know-how and wherewithal, you can view properties and things through the internet, through websites. So what to expect when you're apartment hunting? When you show up and if you like the place, you need to have money in order to pay the application fee. You need to have money to pay for your credit check or your background check, and a security deposit and last month's rent. Those are generally the moving costs when you are going to move into a place. Now, if you're connected with an agency such as Wellspring Family Services or Solid Ground, you will work with your case manager around that in order to have that information ready at the time that you meet with the landlord. And it's important to know who you are on paper. A lot of people think, well, I'll just show up and throw up. Don't do that. Prepare, write it down, know who you are. What's on your credit report? We'll talk about that later on how to find your credit information and what it means when you do find it. The other thing we recommend, and we provided that information to you in our invitation is how to prepare a rental resume. It's the same as if you were looking for a job. So you want to write something up that's going to highlight your strengths as a tenant. Then know what's on your criminal record. That's very important to understand that, and we'll get into details on that as well. Oh, matter of fact, we'll go right into it now. So what shows up on your criminal background check? Now, as of January of 2020, and get that right, the Seattle landlords can no longer disqualify applicants based on their criminal history. You know, there's a few exceptions to that. And I jokingly say, if you kill your last neighbor, that's probably going to be a problem for you to move into another apartment. But if you had crimes against people, that makes it very challenging for you to move into another apartment. Now, misdemeanors, things of that nature, can't disqualify you inside the city of Seattle. However, outside the city of Seattle, you may be disqualified for having any criminal background. Some landlords have a blanket ban against folks with any type of criminal background, which makes it a little harder for you to get an apartment. And what I like to close this slide out with by saying, no matter what is on your criminal background, the most important thing is that you need to be honest and upfront about it. If you don't disclose it, not only are you going to be considered a criminal, but you're also going to be considered a liar if you don't disclose the information. So it's important to just be upfront. Oftentimes, there's things that set out on people's criminal record that they were not even aware of until they went through a screening. But if you know something's out there, make sure you have an explanation or have some resolution to that prior to showing up for that interview. So what are the main things you need to know about your credit report? Number one, you need to know your credit score, and I'm going to cover that later on. And you need to know whether you have anything showing up on your credit report related to debt from a previous housing situation, i.e. as in some damages from a previous place. Now, oftentimes you may not even know you had it out there. So I recommend, and we recommend, that you may want to check with your previous landlord to make sure they didn't put anything against your record when you lived there after you move, because sometimes that does happen. And if you've ever been evicted, that's another one. There's some feedback. Okay, there we go. So if you've ever been evicted, that's very important to know what that was all about. So you want to research that and have good answers for your potential landlord. Okay. Okay, your credit, going back to your credit score. They call it a FICO score. Now, what is the FICO score? FICO takes information and analyzes it to predict what is likely to happen. In other words, how likely are you not to pay the rent? But if you have good credit score, it tells that landlord that you would be a good risk in terms of tenant. The FICO score helps lenders predict consumer behavior, such as what I just said, whether you're going to pay your bills and whether you're going to pay your bills on time. Now, whether they can handle a larger credit line, that's also important. And for a lot of people, and I'll use myself as an example, I came up to Seattle, I'm not going to say when because that's going to date me, but I came here right out of college and I had money in my pocket. I won't say how much, but I had enough money to rent an apartment. And I remember getting into an apartment and I was living in this place out in Redmond and I wanted to watch TV. Well, I didn't have a TV set and I wanted to buy a TV. So I went to, at that time it was called South Center. I know it's called West something now. But anyway, I went to South Center to buy a TV at a place called Dosey's. I'll never forget it. I go there and I said, man, what had happened is that at my apartment, I was trying to watch Roots for the first time. It was the first time I was ever on TV, and I was sitting in the little cabana trying to watch Roots, and the two guys came in and decided they wanted to watch golf in the middle of me watching Roots, which was going to be a problem for us. And we got into this big argument. So I decided, well, the next day I'm going to go get my own TV set so I don't have to be fighting with people over the TV set in the commons area. So I go down to the South Center to get this TV. And I walk into this furniture place. I said, I'd like to buy a TV. And the first thing the guy asked me, he said, so how's your credit? I'm like, I got great credit. You know, I've been in college. I don't owe nobody. I don't have any bills. You know, nobody's after me for money. My credit's perfect. He said, what do you mean your credit's perfect? I said, I don't owe anyone. He said, that's not what credit is. I said, excuse me? And I thought credit meant you didn't owe anybody. So no, credit means you did have money that you owed to people and you were able to pay that and pay it in good faith. And you didn't have any, times where you missed payments, etc. That's what credit is. And I thought, okay, well, I said, regardless of all that, I need to buy a TV set. I got money in my pocket. And he said, well, I can help you establish credit. I said, I don't know. So I'm thinking, I'm old school. I thought he was talking, I forget what my mom used to do during Christmas, but layaway. So I'm thinking layaway, and I know some of you guys can relate to that. Because layaway meant, my mom would buy me something for Christmas, start paying on it in June, but I wouldn't get it till Christmas. And I said, no, I need the TV tonight because there's another show coming on tonight and I don't want to miss it. And the guy said, well, you can take the TV. I said, but even though I'm going to be doing this layaway thing, it's not layaway, it's setting up credit. Either you won't even have to pay us for another 3-4 months. I said, I need the TV to work tonight if I take it home. That's all I care about. And the guy started laughing. He said, no, it'll work just fine. I said, okay, but I'm not going to give you any money. He said, you don't have to give us money for 3-4 months. I said, what? And so he gave me a TV set. I went home, watched Roots. Probably within 6 months, I had every credit card you could think of. Because every time I saw a letter saying, would you like to apply for credit? I thought, oh, I get free stuff. That's what I thought, and so I signed up for everything they sent me. But then I learned you got to pay those bills at the end of the month in some situations. So I got myself in trouble initially. But I learned credit is something you have, and you got to make sure that the interest don't work against you. So you got to stay ahead of the bills. Otherwise, you just dig a hole for yourself. So that's my story about credit. So I just want to put that out there. Credit is a good thing, but it's also something you got to manage. And you got to manage it effectively. Otherwise, you will have a negative outcome down the road. Okay. Now, the other thing that FICA does, they look at your payment history, like I already explained. They want to see, how did you pay your bills? They want to know how much debt do you owe right now? Because I know there's some people go out and buy that 60-inch screen TV set with $10 10-inch money in their pockets, and if you don't have the income to cover your debts in an appropriate way, it can create a problem for people who are considering you for renting an apartment or for purchasing anything. Types of credit you use is another thing that FICA looks at. Looks at how long you took in paying off a debt and whether you have any new credit accounts that just come up that could impact your ability to pay your rent on time. Okay, here we are. What is a good credit score? Now this is not my best slide, but I'll try to read it. It says anything in, sir, you can jump in here and help me out here. Anything below 579 will be viewed by a lender as risky in order for you to rent an apartment, for you to purchase items. Anywhere between 580 and 669, the lender sees you, I can't read this, your score tends, lenders will approve but be skeptical about you being able to cover your debts. Then a good credit would be anywhere between 670 and 739. Most lenders will approve you with a credit score like that. Of course, if you got very good credit, between 740 and 799, you will probably get approved right away. And of course, it's 800 and plus, then obviously you are considered a great risk in terms of you renting an apartment. Sarah, you want to add anything in there at all?
Yeah, the one thing I would add is my understanding is that most landlords, if you have that 579 or below, that's when landlords will reject applications because of it being viewed by lenders, landlords as you being a higher risk.
Yeah. Okay. And your credit score, how do you check out your credit score? There's 3 major credit bureaus. There's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. You should try to see what your credit score is prior to going to that appointment. It's not necessary because, as I explained, your property manager, your landlord, they're going to screen you anyway. They're going to run your credit. But it would be important for you to know kind of what to expect when they do get that screening back. Because I've seen oftentimes with different people, there's stuff that's sitting on their credit report that's a negative thing that they weren't aware they owed. For example, I've seen tenants or clients that I work with who had moved out of an apartment and they moved out. Apartment was fine when they moved out, but in the interim, the previous landlord, charged them for some damages that they were not even aware of that ended up sitting on their credit report. So you want to be aware there's nothing out there, so there's no surprise to you or the potential landlord. Now, Can you rent an apartment if you got bad credit? Of course you can. There's 6 ways to do that we recommend. First of all, again, know what your credit report is so that you can be prepared. Find rentals without credit checks, which that's rare to find anyone who won't run some type of credit check, especially if they plan to take money from you on a monthly basis. They want to make sure you have the ability to do that. The other thing you can do is get a recommendation from someone who can vouch for your ability to pay your rent. Sometimes that's for people who, let's say you just moved out from your mom's house, and I don't know about your mom, but my mom charged me rent. But most moms don't charge rent. But I'm saying if you live with your mom, if you live with your mom and you didn't get charged rent, have her write a letter to say who you are in terms of your character around being responsible for bills. And have a steady and improvable income. That's very good to have. And you can do that by bringing check stubs from where you work currently. And if you haven't received, maybe you're just new to that job and you haven't received your first paycheck, but you can ask your employer to give you a letter of employment, which will state how much money you plan that you will be paid and your hours so that you can estimate on what kind of income you will have. Now, the other thing you can do is that you can flash money to that landlord, place the money up front, as in put down a second deposit. And that tells the landlord, oh, this person really is serious about renting, and they have obviously some financial wherewithal to do that. So say, hey, let me give you an extra security deposit. The other thing that we'll do if you do that is that the unit you're looking at while you're trying to get everything together will be taken off the market and held until you can get it together. But it won't be held forever. I'll let you know, I would say 4 or 5 days at max. The other thing, the last one would be have a co-signer, have someone who can back you up financially, and that they have the income that if you were to fault on your lease or your loan, they can cover you, and have them put something in writing that they have your back. Okay. Here it is, the rental resume, what it is. Now, in the information we sent out in the registration, there's a sample of what a rental resume looks like. What you want to do in that rental resume is list your prior addresses to places where you paid rent. You want to make sure you include the full landlord information, including how to contact that landlord, how long you stayed at the place, and if you can, before you leave that old landlord, see if they'll write a letter of reference for you that you could use when you move to the next place. And because the landlord may call, that your current landlord you're looking at may call, I won't say may, they probably will call prior landlords for references. So you want to kind of fill your reference out before going to your next landlord. You can also include financial information, provide your credit report. But here again, they're going to run their own credit report. Inform the landlord about your current employment, salary, and other financial information if it's applicable. For example, if you won the lottery last weekend, you might want to tell that landlord that, but you probably wouldn't need a landlord if you won the lottery last weekend. If you have been at your job for a long time, make sure you highlight that. That gives the landlord your ability to stabilize financially. And again, letters of recommendation. You can get a letter of recommendation from case managers, from anyone who can talk about your strengths and your ability to meet your obligations financially. Okay.
All right, so if you are experiencing any of the barriers that Billy has been talking about over the last few slides, like if you have a low credit score or prior evictions or some rental debt on your credit, Housing Connector might be able to help. Housing Connector is an organization that partners with landlords and service providers in King County to get landlords to reduce their screening criteria. So any landlord or property that's signed on with Housing Connector doesn't consider credit score at all. So if you have that 580 or below credit score, it shouldn't be a reason that a landlord would deny you. If you have prior evictions or if you've got housing debt or criminal history, Housing Connector can work with those things. And the reason why landlords sign on to this program is that they offer 2 years of eviction prevention support through case management services. And they do this presentation. They have a Zillow hosted database. So if you are experiencing homelessness and need help finding housing and you aren't already connected to a case manager, we're going to put up the information to email Housing Connector at the end of the presentation. And you can email them and let them know, and they can connect you with the case manager. But if you are connected with case management already, you can ask them about Housing Connector and see if they're partnered with Housing Connector, and they can get you access to the different properties that are available on their Zillow platform.
Okay, Sarah. So if I'm a landlord, why would I sign a memorandum of understanding with this program, housing? Why would I do that?
So they offer, if you move into a Housing Connector unit, Housing Connector offers 2 years of eviction prevention support. So what that means, if after you move in, something happens and there's a lease violation or you fall behind on rent, a case manager is going to reach out to you and connect you with resources and services. So it's kind of like extra insurance to that landlord.
Right. Okay, here we are again with those keys. And for those people who joined us late, we don't have keys to apartment or housing. We have ideas and suggestions and recommendations to finding housing and to staying in housing. So the key number 2 would be to do a good search. What does that mean? Okay, you need to know a little bit about your income situation. Actually, you need to know a lot about your income situation. You need to know your rent compared to, and your budget. Nationally, the number is that you should pay less than 50% of your total household income towards your rent. You shouldn't pay more than 50% of your total household income towards your rent. I repeated that because that's very important. Because if you're paying more than that, all it's going to take is for that one car note or that one accident or that one hospital bill, somebody gets sick, and all of a sudden you're going to be hustling backwards again. So you want to have enough income so that you don't pay more than 50% of your income on your rent. Ideally, you shouldn't pay more than 35% of your income towards your rent. That's your total household income. That's everyone in the house is bringing money toward the house. You shouldn't pay more than 35% of your income towards your rent because you need to have stuff in case life happens. You want to create a budget and have a plan for how you will pay rent each month. I know a lot of people, for example, me, you get paid every 2 weeks. Obviously, I don't have enough money in 2 weeks to pay my rent, but I'm going to have to take money from that first paycheck to pay some of my rent next time. So you need to budget that out. You need to plan it out. Because if you spend all your money from your first check and then rent rolls around on the end of the month and you don't have the money because you already spent it, you're going to find yourself in the streets again. So you need to do some budgeting and some planning around how you plan to use it. It's one thing to get money. It's another one to know how to manage it and use it. Budget. I mentioned the word budget. How do you start a budget? First of all, you got to pick a time to do it, which is the hardest thing. Like for me, is you say, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. You never get around to doing it because it's, I remember when I first got married, my wife and I used to sit down at the table together and do our bills together. It's depressing to do bills. And so you tend to procrastinate and put it off. But you have to pick a time. You need to project your income against your expenses. And we talk about the income that you get, net income, the money you actually have in your pocket. That's after the taxes are taken out. Because you can't go to Uncle Sam and say, I need some of that money back in order to pay my rent. So you need to use the money that you have in your pocket. Okay. And of course, your income needs to exceed your expenses on a monthly basis. And this is something you need to do regularly. Just make sure your income that you have, the money in your pocket on a monthly basis, is enough to cover your basic needs. Okay, income used to start your budget should be your net income, which I mentioned, and it's not your gross income. Okay. And what we recommend is that, and this is something I learned when I was in school, is that the first bill you should pay is to yourself. And I say that in a way, but obviously I know I'm going to have bills outstanding. But it's very important, if you can, to put at least 10% of your money away in savings for future things that could happen. Like I said, life happens. 7% of your monthly income should be given towards your living expenses, which would be your rent, your water, sewer, and garbage, your utilities, now that cell phone bill. And then, of course, you got to pay 20% of your income to pay off any debts that you've incurred. And it's important, if you can, that minimum payment, a lot of times when you take out, I learned when I got too many credit cards, that if you make that minimum payment, if they loan you $500 for something, you only make the minimum payment, only probably $5 or $10 goes toward the the bill you owe, the rest of it goes to interest. So it'll take you forever to pay it off. So what you have to learn to do is say, okay, the minimum payment is 25. Maybe I want to pay 30. Lenders don't like that because that means you're taking interest from them. They don't like to do that. That's why some lenders will say they give you an early penalty if you pay your bill off too soon. Isn't that crazy? Because I remember that. I'm thinking, so if I give you all the money now, you'd be upset? Because I don't want to have this hanging on my head every month. I just want to pay it off. Well. Actually, and Sears, probably shouldn't say that, but Sears used to be notorious for that. Because at Christmas time, they wouldn't even send you a bill because they know you want to use money to buy presents. Well, but the interest on that monthly payment continues to go, and to the point that because you take advantage of, I don't have to pay my Sears bill this month. And so I'm going to buy this, buy that. Well, that interest keeps compounding. So you don't want to fall into that trap because that's how they set you up. Lenders will. Okay. Tips for sticking to the budget. First of all, you need to write it down. And right now, there's all types of apps and things you can use where to calculate all your income and your expenses for you. You just put the numbers in and it'll let you know when, okay, this is in the red. It'll show you it's in the red. So you need to make some adjustment. And you need to do that on a monthly basis. And again, I said pay yourself first. But don't overpay yourself because you still got those bills to take care of. Have your financial goals visible. I recommend putting stickies on your refrigerator. If you want to purchase something, sometimes it's better to pay cash than it is to get it on credit. Obviously, because you're going to have to pay the interest on it. And keep it real. If you know you only have so much money, you can't overextend yourself. For example, I was working with a young man probably 3 or 4 years ago who was homeless and he wanted to get an apartment and he was on unemployment. And I think at the time he was getting about $260, $270 a month. And so he went down the Federal Way and found an apartment that he wanted to rent, wanted to come back and have me help him with the moving cost. I said, so how much is the monthly rent? He said, well, it's about $1,800 a month. It was a 2-bedroom. I said, $1,800 a month? And how are you you're getting $270 a week. That don't add up to $1,800 a month because you got to eat, you got to take care of all your other bills and your normal living expenses. So, but he says, well, it has a swimming pool, it's got a basketball court, it has a gym. And I told him, it should have a butler, but it's not a place where you should live, not at your current income. I'm telling you, and don't hate on me. I'm just letting you know that you're going to find yourself in the same situation, homeless. So what you want to do is that find a place you can afford now. And it's important that you keep in mind you rent a place based on what it is that you need, not what you want. So keep it real. Another thing you can do is have an accountability partner. For me, that's my wife. She tracks everything to the penny, and which I'm not complaining because thanks to her, I'm not homeless because she tracks everything. She lets me know what I can spend, what I can't spend. A lot of people don't, I will say men. They don't have the wherewithal to do that, because it's not being a man if you ain't in charge. I don't want to be in charge of my finances because I know what I'll do. I know what I'll do. I'll be homeless. So I'm glad I have an accountability partner. Work with a financial counselor if possible. Now that's going to cost some money, so you're going to have to put that in your budget. But they can also help you handle your business in terms of your finances. Okay. The other thing that kills your budget is that you're not being honest with yourself. For example, that was happening in the housing market here a few years ago, where people going out buying these $1 million home with $100 paychecks. Because at the time, the monthly mortgage was low, but over time, that mortgage is going to creep up on you and increase, which means you're going to lose that house. So you need to be honest with yourself. What can I afford versus what I need? Unrealistic budget line item, which is the same thing. Then lack of adjustments when necessary. Oftentimes, you have to make an adjustment to your budget. Inconsistent expense tracking. For example, if you're going to be going to the casino, and I'll use that as an example, put that in your budget. But when you put it in your budget, if you say, I'm going to the casino, I'm going to spend $100, and you go to the casino, you spend $200, that's going to be a problem for you when you sit down with that budget next time. So you got to have some discipline around your budget. And of course, also forgetting that annual expenses, like taxes for people who are buying houses. And I know when you're renting a place, they have renter's insurance that's due once, sometimes in the monthly rent, but oftentimes it's at the end of your lease, and then you got to pay that as well. So keep an eye on those things that come up when you least expect it. Housing choice. You're still preparing to find a house. So what do you need to think about before you move into a place or look for housing? Number one, where you want to live, what location. The things to consider around your location is that, okay, am I going to be driving 40, 50 miles to work every day, which is going to cut into my budget because of gas? Transportation, if I don't have a car, am I going to be on a main line where I can get to where I need to go? Access to resources such as doctors and schools and daycare for your kids. If I have to drive 50 miles every day to get my kid out of daycare, my kid may end up in daycare for a long time someday. So there's something you want to know. I shouldn't say that. And that's something you want to consider. Where am my support system? If I'm going to have someone who watches my child, a friend, am I close enough where when I say, can you babysit for me? And they say, well, you want me to drive 50 miles to come to your house to babysit your child? So think about your supports before you move into a place. Your unit size, what is ideal? What is achievable? Here again, like that young man I was talking about, he wanted to rent a 2-bedroom apartment and he was a single person. Maybe you don't need a 2-bedroom apartment. You want a 2-bedroom apartment, but your pocketbook says you don't need a 2-bedroom apartment. So you need to consider that. And budget may not allow the desired unit you want initially. If you can only move into a studio or a 1-bedroom versus a 2-bedroom, move into that until you can enhance your income to make sure you're not paying more than 50% of your income on your rent. The other thing people can do is that have shared housing with a friend or someone who wants to rent with you. The caution around that, you kind of have to vet them. You kind of got to screen them and make sure they can hold up their end. But I've worked with people who all of a sudden their roommate doesn't have the money anymore. Then they move out and they're stuck with both portions of the rent and they can't afford it. So make sure whoever you move in with is somebody that's going to be close and can be dependable. Now, there's some other considerations we'll talk about today too. But I will tell you that most landlords want to see that your income, your total household income, is anywhere from 2 to 3 times what the rent will be. And I've even seen one landlord, he didn't want to rent to a person unless the income was at least 5 times what the rent was. And I don't know if Bill Gates has that, but that's what he was asking for. So that's something you need to consider before you move into a place. Can I cover that if the landlord is expecting me to have at least 3.5 times my income in what my rent would be? Okay. Keep in mind also as you're renting, there's 2 ways you can rent. You can rent through a private landlord, or you can go to a corporate-owned business and rent. Now, there's some pros and cons to both. A private landlord tends to be more flexible with pre-qualifying your requirements. They don't hold you to everything. I work with matter of fact, I called her today. I work with an older African-American lady that lives up on Capitol Hill. And she'll tell you, she said, I don't care what people's histories are, as long as they don't create a bad history with me. And I said, okay, so I'm going to send you a person I can tell you right now whose credit score is going to be below 580. She said, as long as they can show me they can pay the rent, I don't worry about that. Now, a private landlord is going to have not as many availabilities as let's say, a large apartment complex. The other thing that can be a negative and a positive about a private landlord is that they're going to be more personable. They're going to be up in your business. They're going to know what you're doing on that property at all times. Like the older lady I was just talking about, she has a camera on her property. She knows who comes and goes and out of her property 24/7. And if all of a sudden, if your cousin comes over at Thanksgiving, they're still there come New Year's, that's going to be a problem because they're not on that lease. So you need to be aware of that. And what you do will be more noticeable. That's with the private landlord. Now, with the corporate owned property, they're going to be stricter in terms of qualifying you because they have to hold everybody to the same standard. And you can usually find on major websites such as apartment.com, and we have a list of those at the end of this in terms of how you find apartments through corporate owned places. Now, one of the negative things about a corporate place is that the landlord and management may change frequently. And something we're going to talk about today is that you want to establish a good relationship with the property manager or the landlord. So if anything happens, you can kind of work things out. But in a corporate setting, that person may change. There's a big turnover in property management. And as I work with property management. I understand why people leave because it's a hard job. I don't envy people who do property management because you're faced with something every day before the day's out that's going to make you want to leave your job sometime. Now, rent increases with a corporate one tends to increase almost on an annual basis, no exceptions. That's not so much with the private landlord. So those are the things to consider and keep in mind. Also, when you're looking for places, search tools. It used to be a time when you were looking for an apartment, you just got in your car, you can just drive around and find places. Well, that can waste a lot of gas and you can spend a lot of time. So what we recommend is that you learn to use, go to the library if you don't have a computer and go to different websites to find out information. The one that I use on a daily basis is called apartments.com. It's really good. It's pretty current. They keep it current. And it has pictures and you can do virtual tours of the units that you're looking at. You can also get all the information regarding what it's going to cost to move into the place, and they will follow up with you. Now, there's a whole list here. Number one on top is Craigslist. I don't think it should be number one on top because I have some Craigslist, for example. A lot of people do advertise in Craigslist, but you got to be cautious with Craigslist because if you go into Craigslist and you see that there's a 5-bedroom house with a swimming pool, a backyard, landscape yard, 3 baths, and the rent it's in Federal Way, and it's rent's going to be $900 a month. That's too good to be true. Guess what? It probably is. There's some underlying stuff you need to be aware of. If you find that, call me. Let me know so I can pass that out to other people. But if you find a 5-bedroom home in Federal Way for $900 a month, please let me know because it's not there. And if it is there, you probably walk in and fall through the floor. Let me tell you, don't do it. You really need to vet that. If you see something, if it's too good to be true, trust me, it probably is. Okay. And then you want to track it. It's a job. You got to make note of renting and leasing signs and where you're traveling and stuff. So you want to keep track of all of that. Okay. The general apartment application process. A lot of places these days want you to fill out an application online. Some people still have you do it old school by paper, but you can do most applications for renting a place now online. But they're going to want you to pay the application fee and the processing fees at the time that you complete the application. You want to be able to provide proof of income. You want to have approved a credit check. Like I said, they're going to run it anyway, but you probably want to know if your credit is good enough for them to consider you as a serious applicant. An approved background check. Again, the landlord is going to run that background. And there's times when there's stuff on your background you might not even know was on there. So you want to make sure you check that out and find a cosigner if needed. Provide that past landlord and personal references that I talked about before so that you have some track record. And again, pay a holding fee. That landlords, when you flash money, they listen. So if you can put down some money to hold the place for you whenever possible, and like Wellspring, I know Wellspring does it, and also Solid Ground, they can provide us, and they'll pay a second security deposit for you if you need it. Okay, next slide. Okay, and I think that's where you jump in there, Sarah.
All right. And so Billy was just talking about move-in costs, and they really can add up. A lot of times it'll be, security deposits, first and last month's rent. So if you need assistance with move-in costs, there's some different organizations that might be able to help. There's a list here. You can always call one of the regional access points and ask for help with move-in costs or diversion services. And Hope Link, Neighborhood House, and Seattle Indian Health Board are also organizations that might be able to help as well. And funding tends to change. So I always recommend, going through the list and making calls to see who might have funding at the time. That brings us to our third key, which is how to be a good tenant. The main things a landlord wants is they want their rent to be paid on time, they want their property to be taken care of, and they want tenants who are respectful and neighborly. So when you're getting ready to sign a lease, first thing you want to do is go ahead and establish a good relationship with your landlord. It can be really beneficial down the line. As Billy mentioned, a lot of times there's a lot of turnover with property managers. But if you can establish that good relationship with your landlord. If there's issues somewhere down the line, if you need to make a late payment or there's a problem that you need addressed, having that foundation can be really helpful. When you're doing your walkthrough, when you move in, think of it as an inspection. Go ahead and if you've got your phone in your camera, take pictures and video of how the apartment looks whenever you're doing that first walkthrough, and make sure that you document if there's, scratches on the countertop or stains in the bathtub, whatever it might be, because when you move out, your security deposit being returned is going to be dependent on, how you left the unit. So if there's things that are already wrong with it, you want to make sure that it's documented so that they don't try and charge you for something that you didn't do. And again, documenting any existing damage, know what's included with your unit, like is water, sewer, trash included with your rent? Do you need to set up your electric bill separately, and all those kind of things. What can you customize? This can be anything from, can you hang frames on the wall? If you wanted to paint a wall a different color, things like that, know what changes you are allowed to make, and some things you might have to run through your landlord first. You want to make sure you confirm pet policies and that your pet's included on your lease if you do have a pet. Consider your commute before you sign a lease, knowing, how long is it going to take you to get to work, childcare, those kind of things could have an impact on whether or not you're happy there. Ask about your lease renewal. What do you have to do in order to renew your lease? Also, what's your out clause? If you needed to move suddenly before your lease is up, a lot of times there's like significant fees associated with that. So you want to make sure you know what would happen in that case. And then anything that you get, make sure you get everything in writing. If it's not in writing, then your landlord hasn't committed to it. So if they, let you know something, make sure you get it written down, because otherwise, I know, for example, whenever I was first touring my apartment, the property manager said that she would give me a couple months of free parking, but then the property management turned over and it wasn't written down anywhere. So when I went to ask for it, they're like, oh no, we don't do that. So if they offer you something like perks whenever you're signing your lease, make sure that gets included in your lease. And so knowing your lease is super important because it's a legal binding document. So anything that's listed in your lease that you might violate is considered a lease violation, which could be grounds for your landlord trying to evict. So your lease is going to ask you to list all of the names of the tenants and make sure everyone that's going to be living in the unit is listed there, because only those people are going to be considered tenants and held accountable for the terms of the lease. Know what your lease term is, know when your rent is due, know also when your rent is late and what the late fees might be. When you pay your security deposit, know where it's going to be held and know what you're going to have to do in order to get it returned. Know what utilities you're going to be responsible for. And then again, late fees, it differs from place to place. So knowing is your rent late on the 5th of the month, or is it late on the 2nd day of the month? And what's going to happen if your rent is late? So you know what you're responsible for, especially things like repairs. Your lease should tell you, what things your maintenance would be responsible for and what things you might be responsible for. And what happens if you have a leak in your sink and it's emergency? Is there an emergency maintenance line? Do you have an online portal for reporting maintenance issues? Access to premises. If you do have something like a maintenance issue, your property should give you a certain amount of warning before someone enters your property. And your lease will tell you, usually it's something like 48 hours. And this is usually, and the exception would be emergencies. Like if there's a leak in the unit above you and there's water rushing into your unit, they usually don't have to give a notice for entering your property for that. And then use of the property. So intended use of the property as a residence for those included on the lease. You can't run a business from your property. And making sure, again, being neighborly, if you live in a communal setting, things like, quiet hours being enforced. And always,
I was going to talk about that a little bit in terms of when you're living on a communal property. I like to tell people that everybody who lives there becomes your property manager. They're going to watch you 24/7, make sure you're not getting away with something they can't get away with. They're going to report when you leave your kid at the swimming pool unsupervised. And if a problem occurs, they're going to tell somebody. And I'll give you an example. I took a young couple to look for a place over in Berrien. And as the young man didn't want to go in, so me and the young lady went in and we're talking to the property manager. And as I'm looking over his shoulder at the window, the young man's peeing in the parking lot. And I'm thinking to myself, and I'm kicking her on the table like, look at your boyfriend there. Because, when I went back outside, I said, do you realize everybody who lives here probably came down and talked to that property manager when we left and say, don't rent to them because he was urinating in the parking lot. So you got to be aware when you live in a communal setting, everybody is your landlord, so to speak, because they're going to be watching you. And your quiet hours, normally they'll say quiet hours starts at 8 o'clock. Well, they assume, not to have your rap crap blasting all day long. They assume that because, people work different shifts and some people are asleep and tired and have babies and, so they're warning you. That's what it means to be neighborly. Be respectful of the people around you. Because when you pay rent, you don't own, you're renting. So anyway, that's my preaching.
So what do you do if you're at risk for losing your housing? So these are some of the main reasons that tenants get evicted. One is moving people in who were not on the lease. Like we were just talking about, if the only people that are listed on your lease are those that are allowed to live on the premises with you. So if you have someone that's staying with you and it ends up that they need to stay with you for an extended period, add them to your lease. They can go through a similar screening process and be added to your lease. And then it's not a lease violation. So that's always something to consider if you're going to have a guest for an extended period of time, because that's one of the most common reasons that a landlord might try and evict you. The other main one being non-payment of rent. And I'll have a slide on this down the road, but right now there's an eviction moratorium because of the pandemic, and you can't be evicted for non-payment of rent through March 31st of 2021 as of now. And then breaking lease agreements, anything that could result in property damage or even complaints from neighbors about noise is a lease violation. So anything that's listed in your lease that you're breaking could be a reason that a landlord might evict. So unauthorized residence, we talked about that a little bit. Non-payment of rent. So what are some of the reasons that tenants fall behind on rent? If the unit is too expensive for your income, a sudden loss of a job or like a medical bill, any kind of major expense that pops up that could cause you to be late on your rent, could be a reason why you might fall behind. So we're going to talk a bit about what to do if you do fall behind on your rent. You want to create a plan before your rent is late on what you're going to do. So if, say you suddenly lose a job halfway through the month and the rent's not due till the 1st, go ahead and start working on a plan then for if you're going to be behind on rent, what are your next steps? What can you do to make sure that you don't fall too far behind? So that would be reaching out to your landlord to see if they can accept a payment plan, let them know what happened. And that comes back to if you've already established a relationship with your landlord, they might be more willing to be understanding and waive late fees or accept a payment plan.
Yeah, I just had that situation this morning. I called a young lady who's renting from a landlord that I've worked with. She's been letting them know that, hey, I got sick and due to COVID, I wasn't able to go back to work right away. So I lost some money. So I'm not able to keep it. She got behind 2 months rent. And so when I called the property manager for it this morning, he said, I know she's been a great tenant. And she said, what's really great about it, she lets me know what the situation is. She says, it's the ones that don't say nothing who think, they realize that I have to make a payment on the property as well. But if you're at least to come and explain it to me, then I'm more likely to work with you. So that's why it's important to have a good relationship.
Yeah. You can also call 211 to get connected with organizations that can help with rental assistance, and then start working on your budget, or maybe making, if you have to start looking for a job or pick up extra hours or reach out to family and friends that might be able to help. And then resources for rental assistance, you can call 211, and what they'll probably do is give you a list of places that might have rental assistance that you'll have to call through and see who currently has funds available. And this should be linked in the Google Doc that we sent out in the email earlier. There's also some resources for eviction prevention. So what do you do if you've lost your job, if that's the reason that you've fallen behind on your rent? You want to begin the job search immediately, reach out to community organizations if you need assistance, and then again, making sure you set up that plan with your landlord and let them know, what's happened and what your plan is for moving forward. When you're doing your job search, you want to create a timeline to set goals. Like the housing search, a job search is a full-time job too, and it's going to take up a lot of time. So it's good to sit down and make a plan for what you want to accomplish week to week. You want to create a professional email address that has your name in it. Do specific job searches, follow up with a phone call or in-person visit. In-person visits probably not as common now because of the pandemic, but you can follow up applications with a phone call to formally introduce yourself. Keep track of where you've applied for. And also importantly, do a cyber cleanse before you start sending in applications. Make sure all of your privacy settings are set on your social media because that is something that potential employers check. For your resume, much like the rental resume, you want to grab attention quickly, show outcomes from your contributions at previous jobs, show what you did and how you did it, showcase your soft skills, highlight any technical knowledge that you have if you have any certifications or trainings, show off what specialized skills you have, include keywords from the job posting. A lot of places will look for words that jump out that were already included in their posting of the job. And then proofreading your resume, send it to a friend, family member, former coworker, anyone that can put a second set of eyes in it to check for any kind of spelling errors and things like that. And here's some of the top job search sites. Indeed.com is a super popular one. Craigslist, again, being cautious with Craigslist, but there are job postings on Craigslist. Monster.com, Glassdoor, all great options. And there's also several job assistance programs in the area. So if you're needing help, finding places that are hiring, WorkSource is a great option. HopeLink has a really great employment program, Goodwill as well. So anything listed on here would be a great resource for folks.
Yeah, some of these places can help with resume writing too, right?
Yeah, WorkSource I know has different programs. They put out a schedule each month of like different kinds of training programs, whether it's resume building or I think they do even things like Word and like those kind of trainings.
Okay.
And you can go to their website and they have a lot of locations around the Seattle area. And some of these other places may have similar programs as well. That's just one that I'm familiar with. Right, so the third reason why tenants will get evicted is breaking other lease agreements. So smoking in the unit's a common one. Whenever you sign your lease, it'll let you know, if you can smoke in the unit, and if not, a lot of times you can't even smoke on your porch. You have to be away from the property. So making sure if you are a smoker, if you're aware where you can smoke. Having unauthorized pets, breaking quiet hours, leaving a mess in the common areas, not taking your trash out to where it's supposed to be taken to, all could be reasons why a property might pursue an eviction. Another thing, you want to know your rights as a tenant. We were talking a lot about what the landlord expects from you, but you also have rights as a tenant. So being aware of what your responsibility is, but also what your landlord's responsible for when it comes to things like repairs, things like that. And this isn't updated, but the moratorium on evictions is now through March 31st of 2021. It's been extended a few different times by the governor, but right now no tenant in King County can be evicted for not paying their rent. And there's a very few reasons why anyone could be evicted right now. Tenant rights resources. The tenants union website is great if you're wondering if something your landlord's doing is legal or not. There's a great search tool on the tenants union website. Solid Ground has a great phone number that you can call into and ask questions. And the Northwest Justice Project also provides great free legal services. All right, and that brings us to the end. And I got us in on time. So if anyone has any questions.
Oh, we should let people know about the certificate of participation. As a result of your attendance today, we will be sending out a certificate indicating that you've been through this training, which we recommend you take that to your when you're looking for an apartment, you can take that with you and say, hey, look, I went through a training on how to be a good tenant. I know what you expect from me because I learned this in this training from Billy and Sarah, that I need to pay my rent on time, I need to be a good neighbor, and all the other things that we taught you today. I know about budgeting my money to make sure I pay you first. And you can say, that's why I learned all that from Billy and Sarah. And that's it.
Yeah, and these are our email addresses. So if you have questions later on, feel free to email me or Billy anytime. And again, if you are someone that is looking for case management to help with getting into housing, you can email this info@housingconnector.com and they can link you up with somebody.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I just wanted to confirm your email address. Is at wellspringfs.org?
Mhm. Yeah, as in family services. Yeah.
And is that also on the information that you gave us, the printouts? The handouts, excuse me.
Yeah, the whole presentation should be included in those handouts as well. So if you needed to go back and reference anything.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And you